Hi, and welcome to day 41. Today we're going to be looking at the creation of a web data extractor. And you can find all kinds of really interesting information online. And sometimes it's useful to be able to take the information from a web page and extract it and put it into your own format for your own use, or maybe use it in another interesting program. And so today I'm going to code the first part of a web data extractor, and we'll be using the requests library as well as BeautifulSoup to sort of pick through that website and see what it is we want to keep. So the interesting thing about websites today is that many of them are um, dynamically created using a database. And the interesting thing about that is that as we look at the code for the website, that data is often very repetitive or easy to identify. For example, if we look at the page source here for this, and let's say I want to look for this information right here. So I'm just going to search on Spring Bunny. Okay, so I'll go here. I'm going to search on Spring Bunny. And there it is, Spring Bunny Paint Night. And what I can see here is that that information is sort of distributed through this really messy looking code. And the interesting thing about it is that it looks messy to us, to our eye, but it also follows a very specific pattern. The reason it looks messy is because it's dynamically created using a database. In other words, the data for that event record is basically captured here in this highlighted section. And if I look, I can find things like the title, right? So I can find Spring Bunny Paint Night in a few different places, but I can look for those. And if I look for data DMS partner name inside the article, I'm going to find that. I can find the category that it's in. I can find a web address, and I'll show you where that web address goes in just a minute. But I can also find like a location, the address, a phone number. I can find all kinds of things. And then if I go back to the main calendar here and I click details, it's going to take me to a detail page. That's that web address. And I can find things like I can find the time and date that it's going to be. And for some of these other events, if I look at those events, it's going to have other information there like a description of the event. So I can grab all of that information by just paying attention to the code, the HTML code here, and using some of these things. Like this span here is called card address. Everything that's inside that is the address. And so if I can find that for every event in that page, then I'm in really good shape. And the interesting thing about this page here is that when you first load it, it looks like each card here is being dynamically loaded. See how they kind of appear as I scroll down? The interesting thing about that is that they're dynamically appearing there with the images, but the information is actually all loaded the minute I load that page. So all of that stuff, all the way down, if I look for community outreach, right? Community outreach, and there it is. You can see that it's all there. So all I have to do is load this page one time and go through the HTML using BeautifulSoup and find that information. So let's get started with our program. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is import BeautifulSoup and the request object. So I'm going to say from BS4 import BeautifulSoup, and I'm going to say import requests because we want that whole library. Requests, there we go. And the starting URL for this one, and I would recommend that you find a website that's interesting to you and kind of parallel this project, but for now I'm going to use this one, HTTPS, and it's www.visitbakersfield.com/events. And I think that's the Bakersfield Chamber of Commerce website for their events. So we'll use that. And of course, as usual, we need to create some headers to pretend to allow Python to masquerade as a legitimate web browser. Otherwise, the server might refuse that connection. So we'll just do that. That's a dictionary. And then the first thing we're going to do is we are going to grab that web page. So we're going to say response equals request.get, and we will use the URL, and we will say the headers for that request are found in the dictionary headers, and timeout equals 10 just to keep us from waiting forever. And then what we want to do is we want to first create an array called li events. Later on, this is where we're going to put our list of events, but we're going to say if response. So in other words, if there's a response, then we will say soup equals BeautifulSoup. We want response.text, so that'll give us the text of the web page, the HTML, and we're going to feed that to the BeautifulSoup HTML parser. Okay, so that's the first part. And really quick, before we do that, I'm going to back up just a second here, and we can print response.text to make sure that we are getting that web page properly. Because if we don't, then nothing else is going to work. So we do that. We wait a second. Wait a second more. There it is. There is the entire web page. And just for ease of use, sometimes I like to take all of that and copy it, and maybe I will put it into another text editor. And there's a lot of stuff there, and it's very weirdly formatted. And the reason for that is because of, like I said, the fact that it's a data-driven website. But there's a lot of stuff there. So the thing that I'm looking for here is the article. And that tells me, because I've looked at this, every piece of this, or every event in that database, is inside of that article tag. So we can use that to our advantage. So once we start parsing that, we will use that article to our advantage, and we're going to start with that right now. So let's hide that and uncomment our BeautifulSoup creation here. And then what we want to do is we want to create a list of the cards. And when I say cards, I'm referring to each one of these because that's the HTML construct. So I'm just going to stick with that. So we're going to say li cards equals soup. And we want to find all. And we're looking for tags that are titled article. And if we do that, I can go through those for individual cards in li cards, print end card. So let's just print. We're going to find all of the article and we're going to print each one of those. So let's run that. And There they are, all of the cards. This is the part that I'm really interested in. So we've got article, and it's going to go all the way down to the end right here, article. So if I want to, I might want to print a couple of blank lines and then maybe a visual separator. That is times 80, so it'll print 80 number signs and 2 lines there. So now it'll be easy to spot, okay, so because it'll have this after each one. So now I can see what an article looks like. Now the interesting thing that I noticed about this is that these early articles seem to be events. You can see Spring Bunny Paint Night here, and that's the end of that one. And then the next article is the Rock Orchestra by Candlelight. But if I scroll all the way down here, you can see I've got things like Where to Stay, Eat and Drink, so music, entertainment. Those I don't want because those aren't part of the events database. So if I scroll all the way down here, I can see, oh, I've got these cards right here. And I don't want those to be part of my data. So what I want to grab here is just the ones that are events. And if you look carefully through these, you can see card featured right here in these non-event ones. And if you go up to the events, they're a little bit different. This is a card listing. And so I can use that. So all I have to do is give this additional attributes, and I can say card listing. And now, if I do this, notice I'm only getting the events. So that's a quick way to filter out the things that I don't want. Now I'm just getting the event as a big jumbled garbage piece of HTML code here, but now I'm getting somewhere a little bit more effectively. So let's, for each card now, let's comment that out. I might want to use it later, but we'll just leave it. And then for each card, let's find the title. Okay, and the best place to find the title I found is right here, the card heading. So card heading contains only this text. All the rest of that is part of HTML tags. So if I grab this text and I strip it, all the garbage off of each side of it, then I'm going to be in good shape. But watch how easy this is using BeautifulSoup. So if I say str title equals individual card find, and there's only one of these per card, so I don't need find all, and this will return just that text or just that object. So I'm going to find the only H3, and as it turns out, there's only one H3 inside of there, so I don't need to give it the additional class here. I'm just going to use H3 text. So I'm getting the text from that, which tells me just everything here. And then finally, I want to strip that. So if I just print str title now, watch what I can get out of this. So there is my list of events, nice and clean, piece of cake, right? So we've got some nice things here that we can do. Let's get now the link to the details, okay? So I'm going to get a link to each one of these detail pages, and we'll list that. So the first thing I need to do is I need to grab the links in our HTML. And if I look back at my little article here, you can see that every article has a link that looks like this, that links to the detail. So all I need to do is grab that and get the href attribute from that link. So first thing I want to do is get the link and put it into a BeautifulSoup object. So bslink equals individual card dot find, and we're going to look for the anchor tag. So that'll return that anchor tag as a BeautifulSoup object. And then we're going to say we are going to get the link from the bslink, and all we have to do is tell it the attribute to get, and it'll return that. And then we can print strlink. So watch this. Next time we run that, we are pulling the title, and there is the link for each one. So far, so good. So let's do something a little bit trickier and get the address from this. So if we say str address equals individual card find, and we're looking for a span. And what span are we looking for? Well, let's find the address. Here's the address, and here's the span. So we're looking for a span with a card address. So I'm just going to copy that, and I'm going to paste it right here. That's 2 underscores, but sometimes getting those via copy and paste is a way to go. That saves you a little bit of time and saves you from mistyping something. And so we're grabbing the text again from inside that span. So just the text, it'll ignore all the HTML, and then it will strip that. So it'll take any white space off the front and back of it. And then the next thing I want to do is I want to convert that address to just one line of text. So all I have to do here to convert that to one line is replace the line breaks in that with a different kind of punctuation. So I'm going to say str address, I'll use self-assignment here, equals str address dot replace, and we're going to replace line breaks, and I'll just replace it with that. So a space and then 2 hyphens and then another space. And then let's print that. Print, and I'll use an F string here to pretty it up a little bit. str address, there we go. And now let's run that again. And there it is. So we have Spring Bunny Paint Night. And maybe what I should do here, just to make sure that we are clear on where one thing ends and where another begins, is just print a little visual separator after each one. So let's run that again, and there we go. Okay, so Spring Bunny Paint Night, here's the link, here's the address. Obviously, if I wanted to pull those out into separate fields or save them in a database with the street address, the location name, the city, state, and zip code, it'd be pretty easy to do that using regular expression, but it doesn't really matter for this purpose how accurate that data is. I just am pulling it out here. So we got the address, and let's pause there for a moment. And before we go into the next part of this, which is we need to follow that link. So we need to follow the link for each one, and we need to get some information like the date, the time, the description of the event from that subpage. We will pause, and we will pick that up next time with day 42 of 100 Days of Python. Thanks for joining me today, and we'll see you next time.